This episode of Minding Your Amygdala was a hard one, and I really wanted to do justice to the topic of hate and racism. Are they mental illness? So, because I talked about this recently in my Get Free webinar, I decided to share the webinar with you for this podcast episode. And I hope that the information in this episode gives you an opportunity to reflect on ways that we can finally address hate and racism as the incredibly damaging, delusional mental illnesses that they are. Check it out. Hey creators, welcome to Minding Your Amygdala, the brain, body, and behavior podcast where you'll learn to awaken to your emotions, get informed about your biology, and motivated to use skills to improve your mental health. I'm your host, Dr. Lana, America's one and only trauma psychiatrist. Do you recognize the critical importance of emotions and mental health? Do you want to know more about how to self-recover from trauma? Do you want to better understand the updated science about how our brain and body shapes our behaviors? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then you're in the right place. This podcast is focused on making complex brain science simple and usable. You'll learn the 6 primitive brain systems predictably programmed by trauma and empathy skills practice, my unique methodology that can help you improve your own thoughts, emotions, and actions. I'm the Skills Over Pills doc, but I'm also a mama 3, a busy entrepreneur, and a human being trying to make it through multiple global pandemics just like you. Minding Your Amygdala will teach you transformative ways that you can approach your day-to-day life, and I'll give you strategies to break free from the trauma cycle. All right, let's get started. Joining me today for this Get Free webinar. This is my 1-hour webinar where I break down concepts, I address the things that are going on in the world today, and it gives you an opportunity to interact with me, get to know Dr. Lana, and understand why I say what I say about mental health. So the reason that I am doing this particular topic, this hate and racism topic, is because, of course, we are dealing with another freaking shooting, another act of domestic terrorism, and another disgusting display of a core issue that's wrong with not just America. It's all across the globe, but America really just has its own special brand of racism, right? So I think it's really important to counteract this narrative that people are hearing, that when they say that hate and racism is not a mental illness. And it's interesting because this is coming from the institutions that are at the greatest helm of teaching about mental health and education in America. And I understand why we do not think of hate and racism as a mental illness in this country. But in this particular, I'm going to take a moment to explain the reason why these things absolutely are mental illnesses. And in order to understand and fix a problem, you have to first name the problem. So let's talk a little bit about how we got here. And I'm definitely open to you all asking questions in the chat. Feel free to interact. And if you have questions or comments, you can raise your hand and I will definitely acknowledge you, because this is not just me telling you. I certainly want to hear from you as well. So first of all, let's explore what is mental illness. When someone says mental illness, type in the chat for me what you think of as mental illness. And I'll read some of the comments and some of the Let's see. I know I got folks in the waiting room. We're trying to get it in. All right. So, mental illness often is thought of as people only having, when people think of mental illness, they have a tendency to think about the extremes. They have a tendency to think about schizophrenia, the person talking to themselves or, walking down the street, homeless. We think about bipolar disorder. We think in the extremes, right? I know one of the celebrities that comes to mind is Kanye, because he's had a very public experience of bipolar disorder and has had very public manic episodes. Someone says inability to cope emotionally with life, mental illness. Okay, that's one definition of mental illness that someone has suggested. Anyone else want to add to that? I think of mental illness in terms of individual psychology as well as social psychology, distress causing dysfunction. Yes, distress causing dysfunction. Let's get even deeper than that. So when we think of mental illness, and it highlights one of the things that is really important for humans to begin to break from, which is our binary thinking. We have a tendency to think of things in a light switch fashion instead of thinking of things as existing on a dial. Okay. So mental illness is not just the extremes of mental illness or severe mental illness that we have a tendency to think of, but mental illness is also on the other side of the dial. People can be very functional, but still have elements of distress in their life and have circumstances that, even though they may be fully functional, I know a whole lot of high functioning people with mental illness like anxiety that doesn't allow them to function at their optimal abilities. There are people who are extremely intelligent and extremely successful, who also struggle at times with being functional in their psychology. We have high profile examples now where elite athletes are coming out, and even elite, what we would call celebrities, right? We got a whole Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial that can shows you that mental illness and substance abuse is included in that, right? And behaviors that we have a tendency to think of as just domestic violence, right? If I get angry enough to go off, yell, scream, slap, or some of these other bizarre behaviors that people are exhibiting, guess what? That's also mental illness. So when we talk about mental illness, I think of mental illness as any way that a person's brain is processing information in a way that disconnects them from an objective reality and causes them to function less than their ideal, less than their capabilities in the world. Now, I know that by that definition, we are mentally ill, and I'm going to tell you why. Okay. Listen, I'm going to tell you why you are mentally ill. You didn't know you was going to come over here and get told you was mentally ill, did you? You didn't. You thought you were coming to just hear about racism and hate. Guess what? I'm talking about you too. Okay. So first of all, let's go to why racism is a delusional condition. It's delusional. Okay. What does the word delusional mean? Type it in for me. Hey, everybody. What does delusional mean to you? There is a definition of delusion, but I just want to know what delusion means to you. Something being not true, being unaware of any other perspective, a view that does not match reality. Come on. The technical definition of delusion is a fixed false belief that does not respond to even solid evidence to the contrary. A fixed false belief that does not respond to evidence to the contrary. Okay. Now, I say that all humans are semi-delusional, And I stuck the semi on there trying to be nice because all of us actually operate in a teeny tiny bubble of perception in the way that our brain calculates information and kicks out internal experiences that we then feel in our body in various different places and creates invisible surges and urges that drive a great deal of our decision making and our behaviors. Okay. If you've been connected to Dr. Alana for any period of time, you know that I go into these primitive brain systems that are dominating the way human beings think and believe and act right now. I won't go deep into all of what these brain systems do in this particular session so that I have time to cover everything I want to cover. But you can access my free mini crash course about the primitive brain systems in my Trauma Recovery Academy. And that's it. We'll drop the link in the chat for the free Primitive Brain Systems crash course so that you too can get to know your reticular activating system, your amygdala, your somatosensory cortex, your brain reward system, your mirror neurons, your biochemical matrix. All of these parts of our brain are what we are familiar with as our internal experience. And that primitive brain is very loud and it's very convincing. So when I say human beings are delusional, and some of us are more delusional than others, remember that we have to think about this as being on a dial. This is not, we're going to get out of this binary thinking. We're going to get out of thinking that does not allow us to appreciate the entire range of things that exist. Okay. So this is, and thank you, Dr. Donna. Dr. Donna says, very worth the 30 minutes to explore those primitive brain systems. Absolutely. Now, when we're talking about how humans have evolved across this space, we have evidence of human life starting on the African continent millions of years ago. We have human ancestors. The oldest human ancestors that we have found are millions, those bones and evidence millions of years old. And we have evolved over time. We know that there were even different types of humans that once lived and then now have died out. And the Homo sapiens species, what we think of as humans, there's only one human race. Just one. Just one. Back in 2003, the Human Genome Project was completed, and that was a multi-institution, many years of intense research to figure out the code of human DNA. And they looked at 6 billion pieces of DNA. And out of those 6 billion pieces of DNA and code of DNA, 99.9% of those were the same, no matter the ethnicity of the human, no matter the gender, no matter where the person was from. When they compared all of these DNA codes that they broke down, they found that we are 99.9% the same. And even there is scientific data that shows that every human being on Earth has the mitochondrial or maternal DNA of the first mother in Africa, the first human being in Africa. And we have the genetic markings so that as humans migrated out of Africa and went up into Europe and in those mountains and lost their melanin and kind of lost their minds a little bit, but then branched out over into Asia and populated many places in the earth. We over those millions of years, we went off to Australia. We populated islands in the Pacific. We came over here and created the indigenous communities that evolved in the native in North America and South America. But all of it started, as far as we know, what scientific evidence says, in Africa. And yet, all of those changes that happened to our external body that made some people's skin lighter than others, and some people's eyes slant more than others, or some people's cultures different, it still doesn't change the fact that there's only one human race. Okay. Homo sapiens sapiens, supposed to be wise man. That's what they tell us, right? Now, if you consider that this whole time we all just been one race, but all of the shenanigans, the pure and utter shenanigans that humans have done, visited upon each other, has been on this very external, superficial interpretation of each other, where I look at someone who has a different skin, different than me, different tribal markings than me, different belief systems than me. And what do humans do? We say, ooh, you and the other tribe, I can kill you. I can take your women, rape your children, take your land, co-opt your resources, and make you believe what we believe. Strongest tribe wins. We've been doing that for hundreds of thousands of years now. Show me somewhere in history where we have not been doing those behaviors. I'll wait. Yeah, okay. So, in the same vein, those primitive human societies, we're still primitive, by the way, these primitive human societies that developed in Europe and decided they needed more spices and more manpower and took their butts on down to Africa, grabbing human beings, came over to the Americas, took a look and was like, manifest destiny, this is all mine, right? Like, however that logic was, and the ways that we have developed our systems, they're based on a complete lack of scientific foundation for these concepts. In fact, scientifically, I know even myself, I still have to break myself out of concepts like black and white. And white people have melanin, y'all. Did you know that? White people have melanin. I used to say the amelanated, lack of melanin. It's not true. They have a lighter version of melanin. There's 3 different versions of melanin. Look it up. It's true. They have a lighter form of melanin. Melanin layer is a pigment that our body makes that overlays our cells and helps protect the DNA and the genetic structure of the cells from ultraviolet radiation and other things as well. So when you come to think about the fact that we are socially still using concepts like mixed race, it irks me every time to hear when people say mixed race, because there's only one race, okay? It's just one. There's different ethnicities, there's different cultures, and there's one race. Now, if you this is no different than how humans were like murdering people who said that the sun was the center of the universe. They were like, no, what are you saying? We will string up you heathens who try to give us good science, right? And persecute you for hundreds of years. And then now fast forward a couple thousand years and we're all like, yeah, totally, we're the third rock from the sun, right? Oh, we all know the earth just revolves around the sun, duh, right? We're still breaking out of concepts like the sun goes up and down. No, the earth revolves and we spin all ourselves on around to it, right? So we have all of these primitive concepts, and one of the biggest primitive concepts, delusional concepts, that we continue to operate on is that there is even something that separates human beings like race. Okay. So when you're talking about white supremacy, let's take it that next step. The entire concept of what America allowed itself to do and be is based on the idea that European whiteness was the highest ideal, right? And that they have some sort of majestic right to lands and resources and other things, supremacy, if you will. So, considering that there is zero scientific basis for this, it has been so widely agreed upon by enough people that you don't need a scientific basis when it's supported by people's lack of conversation about it, right? Because I don't see race. Like the hell you don't. Like you see this skin color, you see this, you see these different features. We don't have to live like that, right? We literally can the 0.1% difference in our genes that makes a difference between me and you, right? So out of 6 billion, only 0.1% make the difference between you and I. And those differences are not even functional differences, meaning our ears may be shaped differently, but for the most part, they're going to both be there and work. Our nose might be shaped differently. Our lips and other parts of our body may be shaped differently, but they still are there. Men and women have so many analogs in our bodies because we all develop from the same template with variations that then take us on a parallel but slightly separate course. But the way that we're taught to think about each other as so different, as so tribal, it's extremely primitive, and it is not based in any scientific reality. It is literally a widespread shared social delusion to think of oneself as somehow better than others. And then now here's the rub. We all do this. We all dehumanize other people a little bit based on the labels that we put on them, right? You know, when we see somebody acting crazy or we call them a criminal, yeah, we don't care what happens to them because, you know, they throw that criminal in jail and whatever else. I made a comment about Michael Brown Jr.'s birthday the other day, and I said, you know, happy birthday, Big Mike, because his death was very traumatic for me. I'm from St. Louis. I'm from that Ferguson area. And somebody got on the page, you know, he was a violent thug, ma'am. And I was like, well, that's what people would have called me when I was a kid growing up in St. Louis doing some of the same things. So thank you. And he still deserves to be seen as a full human being, regardless. And as a psychiatrist, that's my job, to see every person as that spiritual being having a human experience, that powerful creator capable of doing things with their brains and their minds and their thoughts they don't even know that they can do. Okay. So in order to evolve and update the way that we think, we have to begin to acknowledge science. And we have so many people who are not taught that their body and their brain and their emotions are so powerful and always there. We even tell men that they don't have emotions. We tell people not to feel their feelings. So, you know, let's go to hate, the concept of hate. Why is hate a mental illness? Well, first of all, how do you define hate? Let's get some specifics on here. Think about that for a minute, because I don't think that's the most straightforward thing. How would you define hate? And then I'll tell you my definition. You can type it in the chat, or somebody can come off of mute if they want to. And I will wait until somebody responds. Y'all don't know. It's the teacher in me. Phyllis says a strong negative emotion. Nikki says a strong dislike. Okay. I agree with both of those. And I think that, again, one of the things we have to do is start using relative thinking and not thinking in a binary, right? So not thinking in just black and white. And hate could probably be defined as a lot of things. Donna says thinking of us and them, right? Making these divisions in our minds. And Judith says a strong thought or feeling towards anything, right? What's happening when people can't navigate through love properly. Oh, all right, y'all. We tapping on it. Okay. So I think of hate as a dysfunctional combination of fear and love. Hate as a utterly dysfunctional combination of fear and love. Now, when people think of hate, they think of Ku Klux Klan and cross burnings and intentional. anger and aggression towards any one person or another. And I would also challenge that definition because that's just one manifestation of hate. However, hate is also lack of empathy and a lack of willingness to think of something outside of yourself and a willful disconnect from understanding another person's experience. But let me tell you why I say that hate is a combination of fear and love. When you hate something, you think about it a lot. Yeah. When you hate something, you're like, ooh, I couldn't change. Right? You're not always marching down the street, but you're thinking about that thing, and then you are, whatever your interpretation of it, whether it's hating an ex, whether it's hating a task, hating your boss, hate when you think about that person, you get that sensation, and you're like, I would, boy, if I could, I would. I don't know about you, but sometimes you might even wish somebody gone. I don't know. I ain't gonna say it, but all of us have that animal in us. All of us have that space in us where when we perceive them as having hurt us or damaged us or had some sort of negative influence on us, we can really stew in the shit. Okay. All right. Now, when you hate something, you also can be moved to action, right? You're moved to action behind that thing. You structure, when you hate something, you structure your life around that hate. Uh-oh. Now, uh, hate is also addictive. Hate triggers dopamine. When I'm sitting there thinking about, how I could just run up and bust you upside your head, or, whatever way I can to sabotage your success, sabotage your life, or if I'm watching a show that reinforces my perspective and gives me some dopamine and makes me feel right about how I'm thinking and how I'm feeling. If I can go onto the dark web and find other people who think like me, reinforce the anger that I have, guess what? That whole process, that's driving dopamine, that's feeding into that confirmation bias that all humans have. Do y'all know about confirmation bias? Okay. Confirmation bias is our strongest bias. If we have a belief system and somebody says something that fits our belief system, or we trust that person, we are more likely to elevate what they said and devalue what someone else says and thinks, even if the other person is coming with all the evidence, right? Because our body looks for ways to make us right. That's why I say we semi-delusional. Our body and our brain loves to be right. We get dopamine from the rightness. And then we float off into that little bubble. And there's some folks that are more delusional than others, more separated from a shared objective reality and being able to appreciate experiences of other human beings outside of their own, right? I'm not a man in this lifetime, so I don't know what that would be like. And if someone were to tell me what that experience is, I can't say, no, that's not true. This is, I have to be able to say, well, that's what it's like for you to wear that body. You don't know what it's like for me to wear my body in this lifetime. And that's a practice that humans have not engaged in. So when we experience emotions that are as intense as hate, what we are really feeling is fear. We're thinking about how this person can hurt me. Will they be able to do it again? They will not replace us. And that is a fear-driven thought process. That is a thought process that is about the fear of no longer having power and having to actually take in other people's perspectives. Guess what? The way that our society has been set up, we have been separated from really having to acknowledge each other's perception. You can't have empathy and do the things that the four founders of America, the four mothers and the forefathers came here after being persecuted in Europe for their belief systems and their desire to practice their way of life. And then they came to America and traumatized and killed Native Americans and traumatized and kidnapped African Americans, and then built a traumatic system of oppression that allowed them to act as dehumanized animals and murder people, make rules and laws that were that the government enforced that were incredibly primitive and based on delusions, based on a convenience of keeping power. Now the reality is coming to fruition and people are panicking. And the more that people panic, the more they fear and the more they hate. Now, you can't spend all your time obsessing about the Jews, the Blacks, the women, and all of these other things without having some sort of dysfunctional love for those things. Okay, to build your entire identity around a delusional concept of separation when we are all connected is a mental illness. It is a delusion. And we need to address the what, not just the individual delusion of these people who are committing these murders and terrorizing not only communities, but terrorizing across the world. We need to address the collective mental illness that still remains in the way that we think of ourselves as being so separated by this imaginary concept of race, because it drives hate. They can go far, because we have not had the honest conversation about how cruel of a system the human species has built on this earth and how false it is, right? The people who have these beliefs of hatred and supremacy they can find far more information that reinforces their perspective and their confirmation bias than information that says, you know what, humans got it wrong and we need to evolve, we need to change, we need to upgrade, and we really need to think of each other as human beings having a spiritual experience. Spiritual beings have a human experience, one race, multiple ethnicities, many cultures, one race. And by changing, by insisting, so what can we do about it? Because this makes me angry. I'm honestly incredibly angry about this entire process. Every time I see another one of these disgusting interactions with police officers, these awful terror things, and people gnash their teeth and go, what's wrong? What's wrong with humans? I'm like, we're primitive. We are primitive, and we don't even understand the basics about ourselves. So we are self-destructing because we are in a emotional, psychological, and spiritual crisis. We are literally at crisis. And then we go, well, what's wrong with people? Why do we have so much gun violence? Because people do not know how to control their emotions. And they blame how they feel on other people. The Black people are making me feel bad. The immigrants are doing this. If you blame other people for your emotions and how you feel, you are inherently delusional, because that is not how it works. Your belief systems drive how miserable you feel and whatever space it is that you're operating from. Donna says that people who are more delusional haven't had the chance or been required to build shared reality. It's unclear to me how to help those people. And is it our responsibility? Is there a safe way around them? I don't believe there's a safe way around them. I think we have to go through them. And what I mean by that is that we have to actually address the core issues that they are struggling with. And let me say that a lot of people say that it's not mental illness because they don't want mental illness to be associated with violence. And that's fair, because most people that have mental illness, again, as we talked about mental illness being a very large spectrum, not just one thing or another, not just the most extreme, right? So mental illness being such a broad spectrum, we know that it's only a small percentage of humans that actually are violent anyway. And so having mental illness now is growing, don't get me wrong, but the violence is also related to people having more stress, less tolerance, more access to guns and the technology that has given us weapons that can cause more mass harm. And the more harm that happens, the more ripple effect that is occurring for people having stress and trauma and then wanting revenge or having less patience or tolerance for others. And then they react and respond as well. So we are having the ripple effects of this widespread seething. I don't know if y'all feel it, but it just this widespread seething of psychological pain that is not being addressed because we do not have the language to really understand how our emotions are affecting us, how our brain, it's all based in the brain, how our brain even processes information that causes us to hate, that causes us to be addicted to power and addicted to our own perspective. So, what can we do? We can, number one, have empathy. Empathy. That's a lot of what you talking about. Why should I have empathy for these people who are doing this awful stuff? I wanted to cuss y'all, but I be cussing. Yeah, we do have to have empathy for them. And the reason that I say that is that when you understand what has made another person tick, right? When you understand their life story and how they were programmed and what pains they've been through and what things they were told, like that dude was 18 years old. What kind of fuckery was he being exposed to that by 18, he would have such a twisted, angry, hateful perspective, right? To be drawn in during the pandemic, to be drawn into and drawn to such darkness that reinforces the way that he would think to harm other people. That is a sickness, y'all. That is mental illness. That is mental illness. Calling it mental illness does not mean that consequences should not happen. Calling it mental illness does not mean that severe consequences should not happen. But there's also this level of you can't address an issue. You cannot address an issue unless you acknowledge that that issue exists. And any thought process that would elevate any group of people above another group of people is built on delusion. That's the first concept, right? Got bad news for those Christians out there that want to believe that their belief system is the only version that gets folks to God. It just doesn't make sense, y'all. We got 8 billion humans on Earth right now, and we've had a whole bunch more billions of humans, trillions, uncountable number of humans who have existed before Christianity and even our current set of religions were even thought of. You know, it's when we really start thinking about how our belief systems works, the commonality is that what we believe individually and collectively, that is what becomes real. And if you believe that that your human is more supreme than other humans, you will justify whatever jacked up behavior that you do towards that other person. And humans, when they're being primitive, which is our default right now, we have a tendency to make all kinds of assumptions, generalizations, stereotypes, statements like all Black folk do this, all men do that, all women XYZ. That is example of the same type of thinking, just on a different scale. That is the same type of thinking that a person who engages in extremist terrorist behavior does, just on a lower end of the dial. So start by checking yourself and your own thought processes and looking for, where are my belief systems causing me to label another human being and lower their access to full humanity? Where do I place these internal false separations and divides, including and especially specifically related to your language surrounding race, the delusional fixed false belief that says that there's multiple different types of human beings. There is not. There's one race, and we are more alike than we are different. But our brain has learned to make put great meaning to our extremely small differences, which causes us then to hate, which causes us to dehumanize, which causes us to dysfunctionally obsess over other people, other groups of people. And that's not just that's that's our default. However, we can evolve, right? We got this prefrontal cortex that's sitting here waiting to be called upon. Yes, this part of our brain that's barely just waking up. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm so tired. This prefrontal cortex activates with empathy. So make sure that you remember to love, listen and look with suspended judgment, observe the emotions inside of yourself and the other person, see the fear, see the dysfunctional love, see the hate, but see the hurt as well. Validate the differing, very different, but also still relevant perspectives. Validate the differing beliefs. And then express yourself effectively. Creator, remembering that you are a creator. When I first started doing medicine, and when I really I won't even say when I first started, like in my career at the VA, I had to take care of veterans who would literally come in with like N word tattooed across their knuckles, right? Like people who I've had to do surgery on people with white supremacy tattoos and other things across their body. I've had to care for people who I know thought of me as less than because I'm a woman, because I'm Black, because of whatever. But what I had to do is to look past that and to understand what made you like this. Like, who told you that? And where'd you get that from? And then who told them that? And okay, well, where'd they get that from? And the more that you learn about where another person has gotten their belief systems from, the more that you can see the bridge to where they've been hurt, to where they have a belief that's false. You can see the space that allows for correction, and you can see the connected information that they need in order to break free of their addiction to those belief systems. And that's how we and effectively begin to challenge the ugliness that we seem to be consumed in, this racism, this hate. We begin to use words that verbalize the emotions, and remembering that emotions are the language of the soul. When you begin to talk about, okay, what is this hateful person? What do they really fear? And what are they afraid of? What abandonment or what are they imagining will happen if their worst fears come true? Because fear is from that amygdala, and that amygdala is powerful, it's captivating. It tells you all kinds of things about what you should think and feel. But we know that our feelings are not fact. And we know that if we're able to stay calm and be effective, that we can express ourselves in a way that help pull people out of those delusions. And even in that space, it's not to say that consequences are not due. That's not, people, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. My son the other day was like, I'm 11 years old. I got freedom of speech. And I was like, boy, listen, don't let them lie to you. Freedom of speech means the government can't persecute you for something that you say. But freedom of speech don't mean that your mom, your dad, or somebody else may not hand you some severe consequences, my friend. Okay. Freedom of speech does not mean freedom from consequence. All right. Okay. And nor does mental illness absolve people from the consequences of their behavior, because actions have consequences. That is reality. However, in order to help people, in order to keep from having the next incident and the next and the next and the next. We have to begin to shift the way that we think and evolve as humans to correct the great lie, which to me, the great lie is that there's anything other than one race of humans that are all connected in this spiritual matrix that we have to exist in. This week's episode of Minding Your Amygdala was hard to make, y'all, because there are so many emotions that are going on in the world, so many emotions going on even in myself as we process the onslaught of painful, damaging traumas from the massacre in Buffalo, from the massacre in Uvalde. We are facing a reality that's ugly to see. And I hope that this episode has helped to give context to the painful things that we're experiencing. And I invite you to an opportunity to learn more from me on June 22nd through 24th. I'm having my next immersive educational event, The Trauma Cure, Creators Using Radical Empathy. And that's your opportunity to learn more about what you can do, not only to help yourself with all of these traumas, but also to help your family, your friends, your community, and others be able to rebuild and heal themselves as we learn and understand this powerful brain, biology, and behavior together. I hope to see you there. Check out thetraumacure.com. Until next time, be well.